Hello there everyone, so I'm Vale, and today I'll be reviewing the Vale of Anduin for the Third Age Divide and Conquer mod. So the Vale of Anduin faction is located, of course, near the river Anduin, and the vale that it makes through on the other side of the Misty Mountains. Now, in terms of the initial settlements, you have plenty of initial settlements, but only Celeborg and Framsburg are quite the best ones in the beginning of your quest. In terms of the enemies nearby, you have quite a lot of enemies, starting with the orcs of the Misty Mountains, who practically surround you along all of the Misty Mountains. Then you have the remnants of Angmar, or the old orcs of Kundevet, who who will probably cause you some trouble. Of course, since you don't have too many alliances, this also means that the Mirkwood elves could be a threat, as well as the Lorien elves below. Be very careful with that. To offset even more, you have the proximity of Dol Guldur with the Shadow of Mirkwood faction right here on your border, so pretty much you're completely surrounded. Now, to offset that, you do have some quite medium objectives and some nearby goals. You have to eliminate the Shadow of Mirkwood and the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, which will be, would be in the interests of any proper expansion. You do have to hold on to a couple of regions that you already have, plus a couple of them that are pretty much the settlements that you need that are nearby. You do also have to progress into the woods of into the Mirkwood forest, and that won't come any easier as well. So pretty much the overall campaign will be always a struggle, especially starting right up from the beginning. In terms of initial conquests, you either rush Dol Guldur down here, or you start some decent grab on early land. The northeast conquests appear best for the beginning, starting with this rebel village and trying to get a couple of key cities from the Orcs and the Misty Mountains. In terms of paths to victory, it will depend on how you start. You may choose to go on Dol Guldur, as I've said, or just wipe out the orcs at the Misty Mountains. In terms of diplomacy, as already explained, we do have initial two enemies on the Shadow of Mirkwood and the orcs at the Misty Mountains, and you are at least allied with the dwarves of Khazad Dûm. Just a brief overview of the unit roster. It's composed mainly of very light armed forces. Even the basic Veil defenders are quite weak for other standard units. Of course, the Earthed Wardens are about, considering the Veil defenders and the Earthed Wardens, your basic style of unit. You do have a few elite units on the Earthed Knights who are, somewhat similar to medium units on other factions. And you do have a couple of Earthed cavalry right there, which are basically the same thing. Heavy cavalry, but it could be better, of course. They do have the skilled against mounts, so that counts for something. You will have some Veil longbowmen, which are medium archers for any standards, and you can actually recruit a couple of Mirkwood March Wardens, which you should whenever you can. You also have the Karak Guard, some heavy skirmishers, pretty much the best unit that you have, following by the skin changes. These are quite vulnerable against archer fire, so be very careful to use them, as they are your bodyguard units most of the time. So overall, you have pretty much every single unit type, but it's weaker on considering the other factions, so be very careful when using them in battle. In terms of units, we do have a lot of choices, but mostly are very light forces, with a couple of medium choices and very few elite troops. All troop types are available, but, you won't have good units on any of those troop types. The rate of replenishment is kind of medium because you will have a lot of settlements that can produce them. As you can see, even the wooden castle can produce pretty decent units, and the Aethid footmen. You can see that they're quite overpriced for the type of unit that they are, but of course you would very much need them. Veil defenders will be your decent decent infantry, for the beginning. And you do have some Bjornings which are effective against armor. This will be the unit that you want to hack through enemy lines. You also have some Archer Fire, which is always decent, and some Wardens over there for some skirmishing and good staying infantry. Wardens are pretty much the same as Aethid Footmen, but much less in upkeep. They cost much less in upkeep, so you should consider using them instead of Aethid Footmen. Woodsmen and some farmers and some outriders and herders. As you can see, you do have a lot of unit types, but of course it will be a problem since the replenishment rate is still quite high. The only good thing is that if you can actually build up a couple of good buildings, you will have them all pretty soon. In terms of anti-armor, anti-cavalry, you have plenty of anti-cavalry units, but you have quite weak anti-armor, only the Bjornings. Even though the Veil Defendants and the Footmen are good against mounts, and the Wardens as well, you will still need quite some anti-armor. Bjornings should be your units to to micro during any battle. Of course, you do have a couple of a couple of cavalry forces. I'm sorry, but don't count on them too much since they are pretty much light cavalry as all of the units. So overall, I would say that in terms of compositions, you would go with some light troops with cavalry support, and I recommend varied units to deal with most armies. Try to use some spies to check out the best engagements possible. Speaking of buildings, I would say the best settlements, of course, are your capital in Celeborg and Fremsburg. In terms of finances, you are quite strong in terms of finances, and you can pretty much improve easily by building just the basic buildings initially. You do have ports in some cities due to the river, so that will help out immensely your trade. Of course, you can also build a couple of roads nearby, which will help out. Also, you don't have a lot of special buildings, but you do have a lot of different units on many buildings. As you can see, on the farms you can get at least some woodsmen and some Anduin farmers. These are basic units to basic arrow fodder, let's say, just to make sure that you don't die. You do have some farmhand pikemen and farmhand archers, which will go on the chicken farming. So pretty much any building will give you some units, which is always great. You do have some let me check the buildings for the muster ground. Yeah, as you can see, one building, this is quite effective. You only have, of course, it will cost 6,007 turns, but you'll have access to pretty much every unit that you want. So that is something to consider as well when playing with the Vale of Anduin. The relation with armies very good, relation between castle and cities, because they will produce mostly the same troops. Anything else that I want to say? No, basically you have a great relation in terms of buildings. You won't need too much. Just 7 turns and you get all the buildings that you need. So pretty much you should concentrate on that. You do also have some mines in some places, but nevertheless, the basic idea that I would say would be try to improve some ladder tanners on your best cities, Celeborg, maybe Mayselborg and Fremsburg, so that you get at least some armor for your units. Now, speaking of agents, although you start with none, I would recommend getting some agents right away, especially because you need to check out on a lot of forces. One should check out on the Orcs of the Misty Mountains right here, while giving you some information on the villages that you can conquer. Then you need another one, at least for Mirkwood Forest, and to check out on any possible pickups on any settlements here. Then you will need another one to check on Dol Guldur, to make sure that they don't don't grow too much, and another one on the Elves of Lorien, without counting, of course, on the Orcs of the Misty Mountains that have a border with you. So I would go with heavy, I would use our generals, especially
Yes,
to
my lord.
get a couple of watchtowers on your territory, so that you have to rely less on spies. But of course, if you can produce a lot of spies initially, do so. I would go immediately with a spy on the first turn, pretty much. In terms of diplomats are very important because you don't have a lot of alliances. So I would use, at least I would send one to the east and another diplomat to the west to make alliances on both sides, especially with the Mirkwood elves and the dwarves and Dale. That would be, trying to ally yourself with the forces of good, and just to make sure that you offset the other forces. Getting an alliance with the Lothian elves would also be in your interests, and pretty much you don't need too much map information, but if you can get a couple of maps from some of the other factions, that would be good. In terms of assassins, the best use, though, I would say, for assassins would be actually to destroy some facilities, especially the troll facilities from the Orcs of the Eastern Mountains. So that's something to consider for you guys. So now let's resume the faction of the Vale of Anduin. The strong points, I would say that they have varied units. They have a strong unit production as soon as you get a couple of production facilities, and good synergy between castles and cities alike. The replayability of this faction is also very high, I would say, because you do have a lot of paths to victory and a lot of different foes all around you, as I've said. In terms of weak points, of course, you start with no agents on a faction that requires them immediately, and you are surrounded by foes, and also, of course, your weak military. In terms of generals, as I was watching here, you do have a
My lord.
good general, let's say on Hunt Must Be On, and pretty much low quality generals on every other place. You will need to gather them up with the best generals and try to get a couple of conquests to ease that up. Building unit synergy in rush and tech options, I would say in terms of that you don't have a lot of good um, a good rush options, but you have some to consider some tech options, like improving your finances early on and using your initial units to get a couple of conquests, since you have so many units. That will be a good idea as well. I can always see a good rush on the Dur be successful, or even on the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, but a tech option would also be a good choice if you want to go for that, especially because you do have a couple of facilities that can build, in order to just to improve your overall situation here. So it's up to you guys if you want to choose one or the other. In terms of time to victory, should be a short and medium time to victory. You don't have to hold too many regions, and the factions are right here. It's probably one of the shortest time to victory, pretty much. However, in order to do that, you do have some different paths to victory. Well, mainly two paths: kill the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, or kill Dol Guldur right there. In overall overview, I think this is a great faction for a small challenge. It has a lot of replayability. It is an interesting weak faction roster, so you will have to do some adjustments on your tactics on the battlefield, and it's fairly a difficult faction to start with. So that will be it for the Vale of Anduin faction. If you would like some more of these faction overviews, please don't forget to leave a like on this video. Thank you all guys for watching, and goodbye.